Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we have another episode brought to you by White Mountain Knives. Be sure to check them out for all of your knife and EDC needs, and be sure to use this code right here, WSW10, to save 10% off your order from White Mountain Knives. And I would like to take a second and really thank White Mountain Knives. They came on recently as a supporter of the channel, and they have been nothing short of fantastic to work with. There's some great guys over there doing some really good service to the EDC community. So hop over there, give them your business, even if you don't use that code. But I mean, you really should. You save 10%. I mean, why not? But regardless, show those guys some love because they're pretty awesome. They support the knife shenanigans of this idiot right here, and it's greatly appreciated. Now let's get to talking about this knife right here. This is none other than the Kansept Main Street. Very impressive little knife from Kansept. Well, not little, but it is impressive. Let's go over some overall specs first. We have an overall length of 8 inches with a blade length of 3.375 inches, as well as a cutting edge of 3.375 inches. Blade width on this guy is 1.25 inches with a blade thickness coming in at 0.13 inches. Blade material on this guy is M390, so very nice steel indeed, with a Warncliffe style blade, a flat grind, a handle length coming in at 4.625 inches with a handle thickness of 0.45 inches. Handle width on this guy is 0.875 inches with some very, very, very attractive carbon fiber. You guys know, how much I love fat carbon. We'll talk about it a little more when we get to the handle section. We have a liner locking mechanism with a right hand only tip up carry, a weight coming in at 4 ounces with a price of $230. Now, of course, I'm sure you guys probably know this, but the $230 price tag is only because of this fat carbon. They have plenty of other options in G10, micarta, copper, ranging from $78 to $99. So much, much, much more affordable when you get into more of just the common handle materials. I will have this knife in general linked below, so go check them out. To White Mountain Knives. They have a lot of different options in stock that are a lot easier on the wall than this $230. But I gotta say, this this one is my favorite. It's pretty awesome. And it is designed by Dirk Pinkerton. Now, I don't have a lot of Dirk Pinkerton knives, but I have seen a lot of other designs from him, and he has a pretty big footprint in the knife community. He's got some pretty sweet designs, and this is one of them. This is one of them. This is a pretty attractive design here. Let's take a look at some size comparisons. And now I have, let's see, just for the purposes of true size comparisons, this is the Civivi Elementum. And there you go. I think that kind of gives you an idea in length. So it is a bigger knife. There was one knife that really stuck out to me, though, in terms of appearance and aesthetics. And it's in between this guy right here, the Kaiser Critical, and this guy right here, the Kaiser Mini Critical. So as you can see, very much, let's move these guys right there, very much in between these two knives, the Kaiser Mini Critical and the Kaiser Regular Critical. So we'll put pivot to pivot here, and as you can see, it really is. It's right in between these two, much more closer to the Mini Critical. There's also one other knife that's worth comparing here, and it just hit me. 1 second, let me pull it out here. I got it right here. This is definitely one. As a matter of fact, let's get rid of the full-size Critical, and let's go right here. There we go. That right there, that is a good comparison right there. So as you can see, 3 pretty wicked warnings, really right in the middle of these two in terms of aesthetics and kind of just overall feel of these 3 knives. Obviously the Yojimbo too. I don't think I said that. I just randomly grabbed it and threw it on the table. So there you go. I'm sure you guys probably already knew that, though. Most of you are smarter than me. So anyways, let's get into this blade here. It's in all honesty, it's a pretty nice, it's a pretty nice blade. Very aggressive Warncliffe. Definitely has its pros and cons, but overall, it's a pretty solid blade. Very good working edge on this guy. Can really power through some cardboard like no other, and that M390 holds up really well. So in terms of durability and functionality, Wharncliffes are always a very solid option. Wharncliffes and Tontos or Tontos, whatever you guys want to call them, those are right behind drop points. And depending on what I need a knife for, sometimes a Wharncliffe comes ahead of a Tonto for me. It really just comes down to what I need the knife for. But as for the thumb studs on this model, I'm not a huge fan of them, but I have to say, so I carried this knife for a couple days. I wrote the review, and then I carried it a little more. And when I originally wrote this review, I wasn't a big fan of the thumb studs. But then the more I carried it, which was like for another day and a half, but I got to really use the thumb studs more, and I tried to find different ways of opening it, because my typical push up, it didn't have quite the force of deployment. You kind of have to go out at an angle. You really have to kind of get a feel for these thumb studs. We'll talk a little more about that when we get to action. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. But one thing that I don't really love about this blade is that the fact that these thumb studs are in a significant portion of the cutting path. So all this amount of the blade here at the bottom, yeah, it's not going to be super useful if you're really going straight through something, because you have thumb studs there in the way. So that's worth considering. I don't know how many people are going to use the full, true whole blade to do cuts, but some people probably would. So it's important to know if you can't see it clear as day. I had to point it out. I'm supposed to be, encompassing details here within the blade. That's what I noticed. But the jimping is a bit weird on this guy also. It's not, I don't know why it's even there outside of aesthetics. I feel nothing from this, because as you can see, it completely flattens out at the top, and I don't ever hold a knife like this or like this, and even doing like that when I'm pressing directly on the jimping, I don't feel it. So I'm not quite understanding what's going on there. Yeah, I'm glad they didn't completely mill it all the way out to follow those, because then it would be way too aggressive. I think this is something where it's supposed to work if you just push really hard on it, but it's not working for me. So the jimping really does nothing for me. But again, it kind of looks all right. It's not functional. So I don't have any issue with the looks. It's not going to give you any type of real grip. Lastly, I really wish the blade did have a higher flat grind. This, for me, is one that I'd almost like to see it be like almost a full flat grind. I know that may leave issues with the thumb stud, and mounting that on there, because you usually want to put those on a flat base, but that grind could definitely come up a lot higher. I mean, at least bring it up to right under the thumb stud, something. So I wish there would have been a little higher grind on it. But other than that, at the end of the day, it still cuts really well. It walks a fine line of almost slicing, but still somewhat of a slicer. It depends on your terms of what a true slicing blade is. It's got a premium steel, so it can definitely be put to good use and definitely take care of any of your EDC tasks. As for the handle and ergos, definitely the best part of this knife for me, obviously because of the fat carbon. I'm a huge fan of specialty exotic materials on knives, and fat carbon is at the top of that list for me. I like the blues. You have your darker blues, your lighter blues, then the carbon fiber really kicks in. You get the nice shimmer from the light. So that looks great, but it also really does feel good in hand. I mean, looks aside, the true ergos of this knife are pretty good. They're somewhat neutral, but they're still really good. It's somewhat of a thinner knife. It has a nice flat clip. Really like this clip. It could be a little shorter, if anything, but I have no issues with it the way it is, just like this. Feels pretty darn good. Good enough ramp to get over your pocket hem. Sits, kind of, I wouldn't say average, but yeah, I guess I would say average. Not a whole lot showing, but that's kind of whatever. It's a bigger knife. You're going to have a little show, and besides, you kind of want a little showing to show off that fat carbon. That's pretty sweet. But other than that, there's no real hot spots. It carries very well. It's a flat knife. It's a thin flat knife, so you don't really feel it that much in the pocket at all. And yeah, it's a very solid handle and ergos. And now as for this liner lock, you have that nice kind of um, flattened, or maybe I guess this is milled, smoothed out area here where you push in the liner to close that blade. So very, very easy access to the liner lock. You have a very nice lock up here, and yeah, another very well executed liner lock. Now going into the action is pretty good. It's actually really good depending how you want to deploy the blade. If you want to use the thumb studs, it's pretty good. It's good. It's not great, but it's good. I wish these thumb studs were just moved a little. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they put a lot of thought and time into where to put these thumb studs. It takes just a little wrist to really get the good thwack and speed of deployment of the blade that I think a lot of people look for. Just a little wrist does the trick, and it's really good. To just do completely no wrist, it actually works pretty good too, depending on how you deploy the thumb studs. You have to kind of put pressure on it. You have to push down a little with your thumb and kick it out like that to really work. If you just push up or push out, you get kind of that slower speed of deployment that isn't super attractive. Most people want to just really whip it out with authority. One way to do that all the time is by middle finger flicking it. It's very easy, and I slipped my middle finger off when I did that. It works really well with the middle finger deployment. That would be my preferred deployment method for this knife. Definitely how I would do it. It's just very easy. It's a somewhat of a wider handle, so when you're holding this in your hand, it's very easy to kind of push the butt of the knife against your palm and have a really good, just secure handle on it to whip that blade out with your middle finger. So that's definitely the way I would prefer doing it. But if you are just a straight up thumb stud person, the thumb studs, they do work pretty good. They're not my favorite thumb studs in the world. They're pretty average in my opinion. But they do work. They are there. They're effective. Overall action on this guy is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not the best Kansept I've ever handled, but I don't have any real issues with it. Overall thoughts on the knife, I can't say I love it, but I do like it. I prefer, a knife very similar to this. I would take the Mini Critical or the Yojimbo 2 probably over this knife. But if you want a different Wharncliffe that is not a Spyderco, that's not a Kaiser, and you want something to where you can get exotic materials without having to get aftermarket stuff done, this is a really solid option. And at $230, I don't see that much of an issue, because if you were to get scales made for any knife with fat carbon, you're looking at anywhere from $120 to $130, $150. I've seen them anywhere from $120 up to actually $160 depending on the knife. But let's just say $140. You take away $140 and what do you have? That's kind of where this knife is at. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that $230 price tag. When you use materials like fat carbon, that's the price it commands. And keep in mind, fat carbon is made in the USA. So there's extra labor and expenses that go into these handles. These are not cheap. So there's a lot to be said for that. I like the option you have with this. Now, if you're not looking to spend $230, like I said, this knife for $76 to $99 or $78 to $99, now that's something I would fully 100% recommend for anybody. That's not bad at all. And I believe that's obviously not coming in M390. I think that those options are coming in 154 CM, I believe. You'd have to go hop on White Mountain Knives and check it out. But I believe the non-fat carbon versions are coming in with 154 CM, which is still a fine steel too, very easy to sharpen, holds a good edge, good steel. So there you go, guys. That is the Kansept Main Street. Let me know your thoughts on this. Would you go with this over something like the Mini Critical? Pretty interesting. They're very comparable knives. Overall, it's a solid offering. Looking forward, kind of interesting to see what Kansept has coming out. They're right on the fringe of being a brand that really interests me to to where I've had some that were just like home runs and some that I could do without. So very interesting. This one was a win at the end of the day in my books. Pretty good offering from Kansept. Let me know what you guys think. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And until the next one, I'm out.